And for more, let's cross now to London. Hugh Morris is travel news editor for the Daily Telegraph. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Good afternoon.
12 years in service so far. That's a pretty short shelf life before pulling the plug. Was a double-decker super jumbo a bad idea?
I'm not necessarily sure it was a bad idea. I think it did come at the wrong time. I think that it was unfortunate that the financial crash happened shortly after its launch, and the kind of aviation technology seems to have come on leaps and bounds in the last few years. So now already the kind of four-engine double-decker aircraft is looking quite out of date when you compare it to the kind of increasingly efficient, smaller twin-engine aircraft that Boeing and Airbus are both developing now.
Did they badly miscalculate when you look at, what is it, you need at least 400 to 500 passengers to break even?
Well, I think they thought, that some air routes were becoming increasingly congested, and passenger numbers around the world were set to, rise very quickly. And they thought that having a vast aircraft would ease the congestion of some of the most popular routes. But what you have instead is that smaller aircraft are now doing, instead of spoke and hub, are doing point to point. So instead of going via Dubai or via Abu Dhabi, you can now just go, straight from London to Perth or straight to Cape Town, et cetera, et cetera. So the passengers are there, they're just kind of moving in different ways.
Moving in different ways. Hugh Morris, the first time you got on an A380, what were your thoughts?
Well, I was lucky enough to be sat upstairs. And I think, one of the appeals of the A380 is it has this kind of this surreal nature, this kind of like dream-like ambition of aviation. So when you're climbing that spiral staircase to go upstairs, it does have a little bit of magic to it. So you kind of, you are in awe of it. But that doesn't always translate to economics.
Doesn't always translate to economics. There's still Boeing 747s in service. They too have an upper floor, and those date back to the 1960s for the earliest ones. What's the difference here?
Well, I mean, the 747s are getting phased out by the majority of airlines that use them. British Airways, Virgin Atlantic, as well as kind of American carriers. But one of the differences there is that they're being used more and more by cargo airlines. So there's a secondary market for those aircraft, whereas obviously the A380 has only been in service for 12 years. So it hasn't, the 747 kind of stole a march on it, and that secondary market is not there. So, you have airlines like Singapore who've already retired A380s, and instead of being sold on to UPS or whatever, they're being scrapped.
I mentioned the Concorde at the outset. We've never again seen the equivalent of a supersonic transport plane. Will we ever again see a double-decker plane like this?
I think it's very unlikely. I think that there's a huge cost that comes in developing new aircraft, and I don't see Airbus or Boeing ever committing that kind of money into developing another double-decker aircraft after what's happened here.
So you're saying that relatively smaller models, but that can fly longer distances, is what supplanted the A380. Is that the future of commercial aircraft? As you say, the sky's becoming more congested.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all about range. Like the A380 could still fly quite far, but it is about cost, and it is about destinations. And the smaller, more efficient, more like nimble aircraft you have that can fly to point to the destinations that people want to go to, rather than going hub, and so going to Dubai and going elsewhere, that is the answer. It's much easier to fill a plane of 300 people than it is 500 plus.
When you between the time that you place an order for an aircraft and the time that it flies commercially, there's a huge gap. We heard the boss of Airbus today say, "Don't worry, profits are up to 29% for 2018." How does Airbus's future look?
Well, Airbus is, like Boeing, it's developing new aircraft. They have an A350 variant that Emirates switched some of his orders to, and will prove very popular, I think, and that will be, as we just talked about, the kind of future of air travel. Similar to one that Singapore used on the world's longest route between Singapore and New York, I think that's what you're more likely to see: smaller aircraft flying more efficiently and perhaps further.
All right. I want to thank you so much for joining us today from London, Hugh Morris, travel news editor at the Daily Telegraph.
Thank you.